Let's bring in right now to talk about the host of Majority Rules and the Undecideds on two-way and founder of All In Together, Lauren Leader. Lauren, I'm just looking at the top line on the polling that you all took. 78% believe the verdict was the right verdict. 21% thought it was the wrong verdict. And this is the difference in voting with the threat of prison hanging over Donald Trump. A very large difference, 12%, a large difference, 15%, moderate difference, 23%. And that adds up to over 50%. So over 50% of these so-called double haters said it could have an impact on their vote. But overwhelmingly, almost all of them believed Donald Trump got a fair trial.
Yeah, and that was what was so fascinating, and especially in listening to their conversation, is that, first of all, they were so nuanced and really thoughtful about their responses. And, you know, I just want to say, like, this is the only, so far it's the only swing state poll that's been done since the verdict. And it's going to matter a lot because, of course, swing states will decide the election and undecided voters will be a huge factor in the decisions in the election. But what really struck me was that incredible contrast between this confidence in the legal system that the jury was fair, that the trial was fair, and that Trump was treated fairly. So they did not buy any of the Trump sort of claims that the whole thing was rigged and it was unfair to him. They didn't buy that at all. And yet they also felt that it was politically motivated, that the trial was brought this year because of the election, that it wouldn't have happened, that it wasn't an important enough issue to have been brought. A number of them talked about the documents case in Florida, the classified documents, as being more important and didn't understand, you know, why this was brought this year. I'll also say they did not understand the charges. They couldn't articulate what it was that he was convicted of. But I think that's what is so fascinating about this dynamic right now, Joe, and we're seeing this in the national polls as well, that Americans are saying it doesn't matter, or at least there have been some polls saying it doesn't matter, that it's not, that he was treated fairly, the verdict was fair, and yet somehow he's still going to win, and it doesn't matter that he's a felon. And I think that's going to be a really hard circle for the Biden campaign to square over the next few months.
Well, I mean, and of course, these voters were in Georgia and North Carolina. They may be hearing something different than voters in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. I will tell you that, again, we talked about it earlier, Lauren, that Jonathan Muir brought up how older voters, and we've seen that older white voters are staying with Biden, especially in the upper Midwest. Those are the very people, if you look, as Jonathan said, who believe in the rule of law, who believe in decorum. And another part of your survey that I find just absolutely fascinating on these double haters. You ask people why they don't like Joe Biden, and they'll talk about issues. They'll talk about the economy. They'll talk about immigration. You ask why they don't like Donald Trump. 40% almost say his personality, and almost 30% say his corrupt administration. Why is this important? Because for those double haters in the upper Midwest who already have a problem with Donald Trump's personality, already have a problem with his, quote, corrupt administration, doesn't this just feed into Trump's vulnerability among the very voters he has to win over?
Yeah, I think it does. And I think, look, I mean, the other factor that we talk about so much on the show that I always bring up is around what are the motivators and the turnout drivers. And we know, you know, from that last segment, which was so fascinating, look, women remain extraordinarily angry and frustrated with the overturning of Roe. They know that that sits on Donald Trump. And we saw in the midterms, even when Trump was president, the backlash against the chaos, right, which was so motivating for midterm voters in his first term. And I think that's the piece of this that's really hard to put your finger on. You've got this, like, meaningful percentage of undecided voters in key states. But then how does that square against the really intense motivation of people who will vote against him, even if they're not, even if they don't love Joe Biden? And will they come home and turn out for him because of what's at stake, because the issues, and because they don't want the chaos? And I think you're right. We're seeing this in the over 50 voters. I think we will continue to see the strength among women voters, including independent women in the middle, who will I believe, turn out over these issues. And by the way, Trump's been in court. We haven't even begun to hear the chaos coming from him. We got a taste of it in that Fox News interview this weekend. Just wait. I think a lot of Americans, the more they hear, the more they have to reconnect with the chaos and the personality issues. I think they're going to ask those questions. But all in all, the trial seems to have made very little impact, despite the fact that people believe it was fair. He was treated fairly in our justice system.
So, Lauren, you just mentioned that's always been the Biden theory of the case, that the more Americans hear Donald Trump, the less they'll want to sign up for another 4 years of that. But beyond the negative argument the Biden folks can make about Trump, in this focus group and other work you've done, are there any sort of positive pro-Biden messages that are resonating? Or is it simply, hey, we're not the other guy?
I mean, you get so much complaining about the economy when it comes to Biden. We saw that in the poll, too, as Joe pointed out, that when it comes to what are people frustrated with the president, it's the economy, and they don't see him taking enough action. And, you know, I really think that's going to continue to be critical. He's going to have to address that, and continuing to say to people, you know, we're doing great, everything's great, does not seem to be breaking through. I mean, people are not feeling it, especially in the middle class. One of the other women in our focus group also said she felt that neither of the candidates were looking out for the middle class, that they perceive Joe Biden is looking out for more of the poor, Trump is looking out for the rich, and nobody looking out for them. So I think that's going to need to, it's a fascinating dynamic for these folks that remain undecided, but that's an opportunity for the president to potentially win people over.
All right, host of Majority Rules and the Undecideds on Two-Way and founder of All In Together, Lauren Leader, thank you so much.